Hong Kong ID card replacement program gets underway. Trump said to be considering an executive order that would ban US companies from buying Huawei and ZTE equipment. And the US President and First Lady make a surprise visit to American troops in Iraq.
Hello and a very good evening. The Hong Kong Identity Card Replacement Programme got underway today. Senior government officials and law enforcement officers will be the first to get their new IDs. Then in more than 3 weeks' time, it will be time for members of the public to do so, starting with those born in 1985 and 86. Christy Leung has details.
Be prepared for your turn to get the new Smart Identity Card. Between January 21st and the end of March 2019, Hong Kong residents born in 1985 and 1986 can have their ID cards replaced. 9 replacement centres went into service today. With the introduction of self-service kiosks, Chen Dingqi, an assistant director of the Immigration Department, said the whole process should take less than half an hour. At the kiosks, applicants will have to insert their current ID cards, verify their identities through fingerprints, and input application data. They can then proceed to take photos for their new IDs.
Do not let the hair or other things that cover the face. They should not wear some color glasses or even color lens, because it will affect the face recognition in the future.
He added that it would take around 10 working days to process the new cards.
In addition to man counters, applicants can also pick up their new smart identity cards at new self-service kiosks like this one. All you need to do is to insert your existing ID card and verify your identity through fingerprints and facial recognition. The new cards will then be dispensed to you.
For those living overseas who cannot come back for their card replacements in accordance with the department's schedule, they can apply for their new cards within 30 days of their next arrival at the city. Officials warned that those who fail to have their cards replaced on time without any valid reason face a fine of $5,000. Christy Leung, TVB News.
The new ID cards come with enhanced security features which will give you faster immigration clearance at certain checkpoints. Even if you've used e-channels before, look a little closer. These ones are somewhat different from those first installed back in 2004. Authorities have so far set up 100 new self-service immigration counters at 2 checkpoints: the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridges Hong Kong Port Area and the Express Rail Link's West Kowloon Station. If you hold a new Smart ID card, instead of slotting it onto a card reader at the gate, try placing it on the scanner.
Currently, our resident will take about 12 seconds to perform the self-service clearance at our e-channel. For the new e-channel and the new identity card, there's only about 8 seconds.
Users will still need to verify their fingerprints though. The gates also have features enhanced, so when they're closed, the edges of their glass panels will turn red to alert users. Each costs around 180,000 Hong Kong dollars, and the gates are also compatible with existing ID cards registered for self-service immigration clearance. You can expect to see more of them at other checkpoints such as at the future Liantao Heng Yun Wai Boundary Control Point.
On to some other local news now. A unified regulatory body and detaching self-financing arms of government-funded universities. These are some of the recommendations made by a panel tasked with reviewing self-financing post-secondary education. Caleb Law reports.
There may soon be an earthquake for self-financing tertiary institutions. The Task Force on Review of Self-Financing Post-Secondary Education submitted 13 recommendations to the government today. Among the proposed measures is better regulation of self-financed courses, including forming a unified regulatory body.
Necessary and essential that all self-financing institutions providing sub-degree level and first-degree level programs, self-financing programs, should come under a unified regulatory regime under the reformed CAP 320.
This would require the detachment of self-financing arms of government-funded universities.
We expect the government to talk to the 8 universities to see how the migration could be better facilitated. Regarding the linkage to the parent university, we think ultimately it should be for the university governance body, namely the council, to decide the details of the linkage.
The task force also asked for better regulation of substandard institutions.
There should be a fair and transparent mechanism through either legislative or administrative arrangements whereby operators whose development and institutional capabilities fall short of their original plan and prescribed standards after a reasonably long trial period may be deregistered.
Other recommendations include a sharper differentiation of the positioning of associate degrees and higher diploma qualifications. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Overseas now, sources say US President Donald Trump may soon declare a national emergency that would bar US companies from buying telecoms equipment made by Huawei and ZTE. The Reuters news agency says an executive order has been under consideration for more than 8 months, and Trump could issue the order as soon as January. Some fear that it could require them to rip out existing Chinese-made equipment without compensation. If implemented, it would be the latest step by the Trump administration to cut Huawei and ZTE, 2 of China's biggest tech companies, out of the US market. Washington alleges that the 2 companies work on behalf of Beijing and that their equipment could be used to spy on US corporations and American government agencies.
Well, US President Trump and his wife have made an unannounced visit to American troops stationed in Iraq. The trip comes just days after Defense Secretary Jim Mattis quit over disagreements about American strategy in the region. US President Donald Trump had taken some flack for not visiting American soldiers over the Christmas holidays. But the president tried to put that to rest when he made a surprise visit to see the troops in Iraq. Trump was probably looking for some more positive headlines after days of turmoil from his decision to withdraw all soldiers from Syria and halve the number of American troops in Afghanistan. The fallout from the resignation of Defense Chief Jim Mattis and the ongoing partial shutdown of the US government was also something on Trump's mind. But he made it clear to troops that he wasn't backing down from his decision to pull out of Syria.
Our presence in Syria was not open-ended and was never intended to be permanent. 8 years ago, we went there for 3 months and we never left. And I made it clear from the beginning that our mission in Syria was to strip ISIS of its military strongholds. We're not nation building. Rebuilding Syria will require a political solution, and it's a solution that should be paid for by its very rich neighboring countries, not the United States.
Trump said the US had no plans to pull troops out of Iraq for now. But his appraisal of the Syrian situation is at odds with military officials, aides and allies, who consider Islamic State a diminished but still deadly force. His defense secretary and envoy to the anti-ISIS coalition quit after Trump blindsided much of the national security establishment with his call. On the home front, Trump was adamant that the border wall was needed and that the shutdown would continue until Congress passed funding for it.
Look, the American public is demanding a wall. I think they're under a lot of pressure. The problem is we need 10 Democrat votes in the Senate. The House is 100%. You saw that. Nancy said we'd never get the votes in the House. Not only did we get them, we got them by a lot.
Indonesia has widened the no-go zone around the volcano Anak Krakatau and raised the alert level to the 2nd highest. The crater collapsed during a high tide on the volcanic island last Saturday and triggered a tsunami that killed at least 430 people. The volcano has been rumbling on and off since Friday, sparking fears of a bigger eruption. The National Geographic Agency set a 5-kilometer exclusion zone around the island and ordered all flights to steer clear. Residents have also been urged to stay away from the coast. The tsunami triggered by last week's collapse sent waves of up to 5 meters high, smashing into the coast of the Sunda Strait between the islands of Sumatra and Java.
Tunisian authorities have arrested 18 people in a third day of violent street protests around the country. The demonstrations began after a journalist set himself on fire to protest high unemployment and unfulfilled promises since the North African country's 2011 Arab Spring Revolution. A similar scenario helped spark the 2011 protests. The most violent demonstrations are in Kasserine, where police used tear gas to disperse stone-thrown protesters. The military was deployed to help tackle the demonstrators and secure state buildings.
And still ahead tonight. Russia successfully tests a new hypersonic missile. The Travel Industry Council proposes a penalty point system to better manage crowds at shops popular among tourists. And Macau extends its Light Festival by 3 weeks.
A warm welcome back to TVB News. Russia says its military has successfully tested a new hypersonic glide missile. According to Russian President Vladimir Putin, the first regiment of the nuclear-capable missiles will be deployed next year. Alan Buckner reports.
The weapon was launched from a missile base in Russia's Ural Mountains. It was a pre-deployment test of the new missile system called Avangard. The Kremlin said the missile successfully destroyed a target on the Kura shooting range in Kamchatka, 6,000 kilometers away. Russian President Vladimir Putin remotely observed the test from a Defense Ministry building in Moscow. He called it a big moment in the life of the armed forces and the life of the country, saying Russia had obtained a new, highly maneuverable strategic weapon. Putin announced an array of new nuclear weapons in March, saying they can't be intercepted. He said at the time that Russia had to develop the weapons in response to the development of the U.S. missile defense system.
Новая система «Авангард» неуязвима.
Speaking to Russia's top military brass after the test, Putin said Avangard has intercontinental range and can fly at 20 times the speed of sound. He said it heads to a target like a meteorite, like a fireball. Putin said it could hit almost any point in the world and evade U.S.-built missile shields. He proclaimed the Avangard system invincible for today's and future air defense systems. The test comes amid bitter tensions between Moscow and Washington. Relations have sunk to their lowest since the Cold War over the conflict in Ukraine, the war in Syria, and allegations of Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Alan Buckner, TVB News.
Ukraine's leader has announced an end to the 30-day martial law imposed in some areas after Russia seized Ukrainian ships in the Black Sea. President Petro Poroshenko's martial law declaration was widely seen as an attempt by the unpopular leader to score political points ahead of a presidential election next year. Poroshenko told the cabinet that Ukraine had boosted its defenses during the 30-day period. Ukraine's military chief said earlier this month Russia had been ramping up forces near the border since August. The 24 seamen seized by Russia on November 25th remain in custody.
Back in Hong Kong, authorities say they will introduce new measures to tackle an influx of mainland tourists in To Kwa Wan, not traditionally known as a tourist hotspot. Even pro-establishment politicians are speaking out on the matter. Sharon Tang has more.
To Kwa Wan has become a dining and shopping hub for mainland tourists. In light of recent complaints concerning the behavior and traffic violations, members of the Kowloon City District Council met today to think of ways to ease the problem. Pro-establishment legislator Starry Lee, who's also a Kowloon City District Councillor, urged authorities to stop encouraging shops to register as designated spots for tourists out shopping. Stores who wish to receive tour groups must register with the Travel Industry Council and pledge that they would offer refunds if customers are dissatisfied with their products. Alice Chan, Executive Director of the Travel Industry Council, says new control measures will soon be in place. These would make it compulsory for designated tourist shops to impose crowd management controls or be considered in violation of the rules if tourists aren't properly supervised. Also, once the number of offences reach 30 penalty points, their registration will be cancelled. Some also suggested prohibiting new shops from opening in the district, but the government says that's impossible given Hong Kong's free economy. Others also raised concerns about a case when more than 1,000 tourists who joined a harbour cruise caused a disturbance to residents who live nearby the district pier. There was a suggestion to move those taking the harbour cruise to the Kai Tak cruise terminal, but authorities say they will have to look into the matter. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
A man imprisoned for contempt of court over the clearance of a Mong Kok Occupy protest site in 2014 has won an appeal against his sentence. The 73-year-old is now a free man after the court reduced his jail term. Appellant Lo Tip Man did not appear at court today. In October, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison after being found guilty of criminal contempt of court. After serving 13 days of his sentence, he successfully applied for bail pending an appeal. Today, the Court of Appeal noted that Lo was not a planner of Occupy and he was given a heavier sentence than two other protesters who played a similar role in the movement. The court reduced Lo's sentence to 13 days behind bars and granted him an immediate release.
Each year, about 100 people are prosecuted for making false statements to withdraw funds from their Mandatory Provident Fund accounts early. Still, that hasn't stopped agents from prodding people to make early withdrawals under false pretenses and charging them fees of up to 20% of their MPF savings. Christy Leung found this report.
It all started with a marketing call. The caller promised 100% success rates for Mr. Wong to withdraw his MPF benefits early. Wong was then referred to an agency in Tsuen Wan. A supervisor there offered to help him file a request for an early withdrawal on the grounds that he will leave Hong Kong for good. A permanent departure is currently accepted by the authorities as a reason for MPF scheme members to withdraw funds before they reach the age of 65. The account holders are required to make a formal declaration about their permanent departure. But the agency's supervisor told Wong he can go away for a few days and then come back and live in Hong Kong. If Wong ends up collecting the money he has accumulated in his MPF account, totaling $91,000, the agency will charge him $12,000 in service fee. But actually the cost could be a lot higher. It's a criminal offense for an MPF scheme member to provide false or misleading information to a trustee or the Mandatory Provident Fund Scheme's authority. A first conviction could result in a $100,000 fine and 1 year in jail. The MPFA issued 530 summonses in the past 5 years in relation to false claims of permanent departure from the city. In most cases, offenders were fined or given community service orders. 5 received suspended jail terms last year. Lawyer Daniel Wong suggested the intermediaries involved should also be prosecuted for abetting others in the crime. Christy Leung, TVB News.
And finally, the 4th Macau Light Festival has been so well received that organisers will be extending it by 3 weeks. Over at the ruins of St. Paul's, it took 3 months to design and create this light projection map, showcasing Macau's gastronomic culture. Old meets new elements are also manifested through this interactive game of nostalgic hopscotch. Apart from the light shows, visitors can also enjoy an aerial view of the city with the Flyover Macau VR experience at the Nam Van Lake Nautical Centre. Until the 20th of January, visitors can gain a taste of Old Macau by taking part in the Light Festival from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that's the news.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.